The cinema specialist Phil and John are back, and it is Oscar season. So John and I are taking a break from doing top 10 movies, although the thumbnail here might tell you that it's top 10 movies. But John and I are taking a break, and we are actually deciding to talk about some of the worst, right? People love at this time of year to put up what is the worst Best Picture winner. They always throw in movies that are way better than anything that came out way, way long ago. Don't let them fool you. But we figured, what's the worst Best Picture nominee since 2000? With Emilia Perez getting the nomination this year, that has caused quite a stir in Hollywood from both people who make films and people who don't make films and don't really know anything about films. Everybody has pretty much come to an agreement that Emilia Perez wasn't very good. So John and I were like, this is our chance. It's the 25th year. I guess it's technically 26th, right? Because you got to do 2000. Yeah. But we're talking from 2000 to 2025. What are the worst movies nominated for Best Picture? And I can confidently say I've seen all of these, which is huge, because I know a lot of people probably haven't, especially when they make these lists of worst Best Picture winner and all of that. I am excited to do this because I love talking about, like, no, that movie's actually not as bad as other said movies. So I've had my top 10 ready to go since we came up with this idea about a month ago. John, how's it been for you?
I had 5 that were pretty locked in right away. And I had some holes in my Best Picture nominees that I had to fill. Let me tell you, at the end of last week, when we were talking about those heartbreaking romance stories and love stories and everything, it was a pretty rough week of movie watching. This is a rough week of movie watching on a very different reason.
Yeah, I mean, the best part for me was I didn't have to watch anything. The only thing I rewatched was The Blind Side for the Patreon podcast. That was literally it.
Yeah.
So,
well,
yeah, here we
go.
It
was rough. There are some bad movies that have been nominated for Best Picture, that's for sure.
Yeah. So here we go. We're going to be jumping into these. John, are there any that still missed your radar for those 2000 to 2025 Best Picture nominees?
There are a couple that I've seen like talks about as like some of the more worst ones that I didn't get around to watching. Something like Chocolat shows up in a lot of lists that are talking about the worst nominees. Didn't get around to that. Didn't get around to like The Reader. But the bigger thing was I went through like the list of all the nominees from 2000 onwards, and there are a lot of years that are just kind of excluded from this conversation. You're like, none of these are really all that bad.
Yeah. Chocolat is fine to me. And like, it's funny, most of mine are actually from newer years. The Reader didn't make my list. The Reader is a movie that I talk about a lot as being one that I don't like. And it didn't make my list as one of the worst Best Picture nominees since 2000. It was close. It was like 11 or 12, but it ultimately didn't make it. It's fun to go through this. So like that Gladiator, Chocolat, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Aaron Brockovich, Traffic. Gladiator is the only one there that I love, but that doesn't mean the others are bad, right? And you would say, okay, that's like a weaker Best Picture year. It kind of depends on what you're looking for. Like, are you looking for powerhouse movies that are just phenomenal across the board? Like a powerhouse group of 5 to 10, depending on how many? Or is it more of like, hey, these 9 are great and then this other one is weak? What I found is like, there's just a couple of years where they just dropped the ball. Like, I don't know what they were doing. They just missed it. And I'm not, now that I've gotten older and I've moved away from some of my teenage loves here for movies, like 2008 was always a brutal year for me. Because you don't get The Dark Knight, you don't get The Wrestler. None of the movies on there ultimately made my list. It doesn't mean that I think any of them are particularly great. I think Slumdog, I gave that 4 stars. The rest of the movies that were nominated that year, I'm like, whatever. But this isn't about like what shouldn't have been nominated and got the nomination over some other movie. This is just simply which are the worst movies, which are like the 1.5, 2-star, 1-star movies that fit onto this list. I only have one Best Picture winner on my list. A Beautiful Mind was another one that was close, but no cigar. I do not like A Beautiful Mind. I think that movie is a total disaster. But yeah, I have my 10 and I'm excited to talk about some movies that, man, I actually think what's crazy, John, is as I'm looking at this right now, the most recent or the oldest movie that I have on this list, I want to make sure I'm right on this, is from 2009. I don't have anything from 2000 through 2008.
Same with me. And I have 2 from 2009 on my list.
Yeah. Yeah,
No,
you have two. Okay.
I do. But
I know why.
But
Gotcha.
what was 2009?
Well, that was I don't
It's the
know.
expanded Oscars.
Oh, yeah, that was the first year they went from 5 to 10. That
And
was the
that's what
first
it
year
comes
they
down
went.
to. And
Yeah.
remember, it wasn't what we have now, where it's like you can have between 5 and 10 nominees. It was you had to have 10 nominees. So they filled it up with some pretty bad movies at times.
Well, and I think what people don't understand now, because we've done the whole 10 movies, number between 5 and 10, we've done all that. The reason why it was expanded was to include animation, because Wally didn't get a nomination, and to include popular blockbuster type movies, because The Dark Knight didn't get a nomination.
Yes.
That was why it expanded. So if you look at the movies that got nominated the next year, Avatar, and Avatar was the front runner for the longest time. The longest time. Then you get District 9. That was very much in, like, District 9 does not get an Oscar nomination any other time. No. It got that Oscar nomination because of when it came out. They put in A Serious Man because that's a Coen Brothers movie. Like, and then they get Up, right? So you get a lot of movies from a lot of different genres, because what the complaint was prior to this was, why do you only nominate Oscar bait type movies? Like, it was, there's an Oscar type movie, The Dark Knight should have been nominated that year. You didn't nominate it so that you could give it to everything else. And so you could go Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Frost Nixon, and The Reader. Like, Milk is a solid movie, but like those other three, they're fine, but there's no way they're better than The Dark Knight. And it's like, what do you want? Okay, let's expand. And then what happens in 2010? You get Toy Story 3, right? You get Inception, you get The Fighter, you get Black Swan. All of a sudden, you get True Grit, another Coen Brothers, a Western. You're getting more genres involved.
Yeah.
So you're right. 2009 was always going to be one of the weaker years, because they didn't really know what they were doing. They were trying to learn, like, what do people actually want from this? And Jordan Alford says Avatar way better than The Hurt Locker. Honestly, they both.
Well, let's just say one of those are on my list, and it's not the one that won Best Picture.
Well, I'm going to be honest. Neither one of those are on my list, because really, like, I mean, The Hurt Locker is just so, to me, average. And then Avatar, like, it looked good for the time. The story is nothing. And, like, honestly, now that we're 16 years removed, I watched it before I watched Way of Water. It's okay. It's fine.
It's so not okay, but we'll get to that. We'll get to it. I promise. I think one of the big things too is what we've seen since 2009 and since the expanded category is that we've gotten, the Oscars have kind of nailed it down. Like, last year was a phenomenal year. All 10 of those movies were great movies that were nominated for Best Picture. And then we get a year like this year where it's like, okay, everything's kind of like, it feels like it averages out at a very, like, mid-year, right? Like, we have a couple that are really good, one that's really bad, and a bunch of, like, good movies, like middling movies. And some years are heavy hitters and some just don't lack. And I think that's what this, going through and figuring out what this list was, really showed, is that there were some moments that are just like, why did you do this? Like, why was this nominated? And I think actually, like, another good example of this is one that just missed my list is American Sniper. And because Jordan Alford's saying Avatar's mid, but I hate The Hurt Locker, it's an incredibly boring movie. The same movie gets nominated 2 years later or 3 years later with American Sniper. They're the same movie.
American Sniper was 2014, John. That was 5 years.
God. Well, okay. 5 years later, it's the same movie gets nominated. It is the same movie as The Hurt Locker.
Yeah, I like American Sniper more. I mean, I don't think either of them are great, but I like American Sniper more. Maybe that's just my favoritism towards Clint Eastwood. I think Clint Eastwood had like a little bit of a surge in the late 2000s with, or mid 2000s with $1 Million Baby, Gran Torino. Gran Torino was another one in 2008 that probably should have been nominated. Yes, I understand that movie has, the point of that movie is that it's very racist. Like, that's the point, everybody. Like, I understand that there's words in that movie that you don't want to hear, but that's kind of the point of the movie. Anyway, so we're going to dive into this. We're each going to give our own list of 10. I'm excited to do this. Like I said, I've had my list. There was a couple movies I moved around. I've seen everything. So now I have to say this, right? I actually haven't seen every movie nominated for Best Picture since 2000 because I still haven't seen Nickel Boys. That's the only one I haven't gotten to, but I am very confident that Nickel Boys wouldn't land on my list. So I'm okay with the fact that I'm doing this. And if you want to hear me talk about Nickel Boys, it's on Monday for our patrons. We're going to be talking about Nickel Boys. And if I end up hating it that much, I will amend my list over there on the Patreon. So don't you worry. But I feel like this is a fun exercise because I think there's a lot of movies that get a really bad rap that at the end of the day are kind of innocuous, right? They're just like, they're there. They exist. They're okay. Maybe they're not as good. Like Winter's Bone is one where I'm like, it's a movie that exists. That's nice. You know, I guess that this is just where we're at. So let's dive in, shall we?
Yeah. And I think like people are going to ask, obviously Crash is in your top 100.
Oh yeah.
And it's not on my list. Like,
yeah,
it's not. And it's like Crash gets kind of more put down because it beat what I think is a better movie in Brokeback Mountain. But that's not the thing. And ultimately on my list, there's not a single movie that I rated higher than 1.5 stars that I am going to be talking about today.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, I think my highest is 2. I think I have 2 2-star movies, and then I just go from there. So yeah. And John, by the way, I changed one on my list that you're not going to know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're not going to know. So I'm not going to do a full Spielberg hate fest here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, instead I throw another iconic director in there to make everybody mad. But anyway, yeah. And I will say, like, I didn't go back and rewatch any of these, so some of this is based on memory. But honestly, if I saw the name of the movie listed and it made me angry, it went on the list. All right. So here we go. You want to kick off with 10?
I think you should start with 10 because my 10 is going to upset people, and we want them to listen to the podcast just a little bit more before they turn it off.
Yeah. So let's start off by saying this, right? I said I only have one Best Picture nominee on here. That's it. Only one. Or I'm sorry, one Best Picture winner. Sorry. Obviously, they're all nominees. If they weren't, we totally dropped the ball on what this podcast is about. But so I only have one Best Picture winner on here. And yeah, you already said Crash is in my top 100. I love Crash. I don't care. Like, everybody can hate on Crash. That can be the popular thing. People can say what they want to say about. I love Crash. I think Crash is an excellent plotted screenplay. I think it's a very entertaining movie, and it does what I want, which is entertain me, but make me think. And ultimately, I think it's a well-made movie. Gladiator's in my top 100. A Beautiful Mind, like I said, just missed. Chicago, I don't really like all that much, but it is what it is. Other than that, and like The Hurt Locker is whatever. Other than that, for the most part, I'm into all of the Best Picture winners, right? Like, I think Green Book is another one of those movies that's fine. Like, it's fine. It's fine. Nomadland is fine. Like, I don't like Nomadland that much. I'm not going to go watch Nomadland or Green Book again, but they're fine. Like, they're not like, yes, they get crapped on for winning, especially Green Book, but it's like Green Book can be it can be a bad Best Picture winner, but that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. I think that's what people miss. Black Klansman, if you wanted to go with the whole racial issues in society, Black Klansman should have been the winner that year, and there's no question about it. Now, all of that said, there is one movie that unforgivably won Best Picture. And what's funny is it didn't even come out in a year where the movies I felt were all that amazing, that were up there against it. And that's Coda. God, I hate this movie.
Of course. Yeah.
I hate this movie. And I gave this movie 2 stars when it came out. And I'm going to be honest, the more I've thought about it and the more I've talked about it, I probably could drop this. But because for the sake of this podcast, because I know it's a 2-star movie, because that's what I have it labeled as, everything else is either 2 or 1.5. So I couldn't drop this down to 1.5 and start putting it other places. This movie frustrated me. It's too cheesy. It's too corny. Troy Kotsur is the only reason to watch this movie. This winning Best Picture over The Power of the Dog is absolutely insane to me. I think The Power of the Dog, Licorice Pizza, and now that Dune Part 2 was solid enough, Dune Part 1, I think, to me, deserves to be up here. I hated this. Like, I hated this experience. This is just not my type. Do I understand why people liked Coda? Yeah. It's just not my kind of movie. The overly cheesy, in your face, like, that is what is going to be on this list for me, is these like feel good, wow, like crowd pleaser type movies. And it's not because I'm trying to be different. It's because these aren't the best versions of those movies. And Coda, to me, I have it. So I have my Best Picture winners ranked. And the only movie that could win Best Picture this year that would go behind Coda would be Emilia Perez. Spoiler, Emilia Perez will be on my list at some point. But when I rank my Best Picture winners, I currently have Coda at number 93 out of 97, ahead of only Driving Miss Daisy, Around the World in 80 Days, because every single joke in that movie is dated, The Broadway Melody, because it's a cacophony of sound that makes you want to like put earplugs in, and then Out of Africa, because that is just the ultimate snooze. So Coda, not good. That's my number 10.
Yeah, I mean, Coda's a very serviceable movie. It does what it's doing. The problem is it's a very typical coming of age story, like very typical coming of age story. And I was nowhere near as low on this movie as you were. I was still outraged when it won Best Picture because it definitely didn't deserve to win Best Picture that year. But I also have spent the last 3 years since this movie's come out talking to you about it and how much you just like this movie. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and like just to talk about how close A Beautiful Mind was to making this list, Beautiful Mind is ranked 92 on my Best Picture winner list. This is 93. So that's how close A Beautiful Mind was to making this. But yeah, to me, Coda, it's the worst one out of the new movies and everything, and like, you know, newer from 2000. And honestly, this and A Beautiful Mind and Nomadland, and I've talked to you about Spotlight. We've already gone into that. Chicago. Those are the weaker of the Best Picture winners, in my opinion, of the last 25 years. But we'll see what happens this year. The only one that could be worse than Coda would be Amelia Perez. And if Amelia Perez wins Best Picture at this point, what the hell?
I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, what the hell took place? So Jordan also says Green Book got flack for outside reasons. Apparently the real life guy fabricated how close their friendship was. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, and look, I watched the movie for what the movie is. I'll read about it after. There's certain things that'll frustrate me. But if the movie hits the points it needs to and makes me feel something, that's fine. I thought that movie was entertaining enough. Vigo was very good. Mahershala was very good. It did what it needed to do. It's not the worst.
Okay.
All right, John, start yelling.
Okay. So my number 10. You know what? I don't think you're going to be terribly surprised by this, Phil, because we actually talked about this almost a year ago and how much, like, on a rewatch, I very much dislike this movie. My number 10 is Joker.
Really? Okay. Yeah. I am surprised by that.
Joker just does not do it for me. On my latest rewatch, I think the thing with Joker and why it has to be on this list for me, Joaquin Phoenix gives a spectacular performance in this movie, and I cannot deny that. It is the only good thing about this movie. Everything else, this is a movie that if it did not have this relation to the Batman universe, even though as loose as it is, I don't think anyone would ever talk about this movie. I don't think anyone would have seen this movie. This movie is just so schlocky. It's such a terrible representation of mental health and mental illness. It's so... I get aggravated when I think about it. It's just such a frustrating movie. And that is the thing that you're going to notice about this entire list. These movies are frustrating. Like you said, going through the nominees, you put them on your list if you saw the name and it made you angry. That's how I feel about all the movies on this list. They make me angry. And if they don't make me angry because I'm like counterculture and want to like, oh my God, this movie's popular and I don't like it. I liked Joker the first time I saw it. But in reflection, after, starting this podcast and spending so much time investigating film over the 5 years between seeing that movie the first time and rewatching it again, it just doesn't hold up. It's just not great. It's been done before better. Like Jordan Alford says in the comments here, it's king of comedy. Mm-hmm. But Joaquin Phoenix's performance in it is so amazing that it blinded everyone from how bad the rest of the movie is.
Well, and that's where, for me, this movie can't be there because of Joaquin Phoenix's performance. Like, I gave this 3 stars. I felt like this was one of those movies that people pretended was way deeper than it was. I understand that, though. Like, you're making a serious version of a comic book movie, and that is going to hit comic book people in a different way. And I'm not trying to like insult comic book people, but they're watching this. And honestly, if you're watching a lot of comic book movies and you're not watching a lot of other things, this is one of the deeper movies you're going to have seen. Like, that's just a fact. But I like Joker. I thought it was fine. Like, it didn't piss me off. I'm never going to see the second one. No way. And I probably won't ever watch Joker again, which is going to keep it from ever dropping in my rankings. But I also feel like I went into Joker expecting it not to be very good. And then when I watched it, I was like, okay, that was inoffensive. Unlike the next movie I'm going to have on my list. But yeah, this one I just felt like was inoffensive. And Kevin Hernandez says, every good story has already been told, but Joker's lack of originality is disappointing and apparent. Jordan Alford says, king of comedy ripoff. I think that's the other thing is like Joker is such a fascinating character. We've had 2 people win Oscars for playing this role, 3 nominations because we had Jack Nicholson get nominated for the 1989 Batman. And the fact that it didn't seem like it did anything all that unique, it just used the Joker name to sell the movie. What if this movie was called, John? And it's about you. You know what I mean? It's nobody cares at that point then.
Nobody would have seen the movie. And that's just what it comes down to. Is like, if this didn't have the Joker name attached to it, nobody would have cared about this movie whatsoever. Despite the fact that Joaquin Phoenix gives a great performance.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, that's how I feel about some of these. And there's some movies that they slap on whatever thing, and then they make the story they want, and you're like, oh wow, that story was better because like it's for a movie about Joker to be that deep, and it's like, okay, but take out the Joker name, make it anything else. It's whatever. All right. Because you talked about this, I am going to do my number 9 before you.
Okay.
I'm going to do my number 9 before you. I have Black Panther.
I figured you had half this on your list.
Yeah, I have Black Panther. This is a movie that just frustrates me to no end. When I rewatched it, I actually moved it up half a star, which is funny when we did it for the podcast. For our Marvel Cinematic rewatch or watch, because I hadn't seen any of them. But when I did that, I moved it up half a star. So ultimately, this is a 2-star movie, but it's on the lower end of a 2-star movie. This movie, like from a Marvel standpoint, and this is great because now I have lists of things I can go to, right? Like I can actually say confidently where I rank this in movies, like from the same genre. So MCU movies, I haven't seen the new Captain America. I have this Black Panther movie ranked 25th out of 34. That's how much I dislike this movie, right? And now I can say that even as a Marvel movie, Black Panther is nowhere near as good as some of the best ones. So for this to be the Marvel movie that has been nominated for Best Picture, because since then none have been nominated. Some maybe have come close, I don't know, but none have ultimately gotten over the hump. Why was this one nominated? And what frustrates me the most with this movie is it cleaned up on Oscar night, beat The Favorite for so many things, when The Favorite is an infinitely better movie. Like infinitely. Like there's literally not a number you could put on it for the amount of times better a movie is than The Favorite is over Black Panther. And this just cleaned up. And I have another movie from this same year. So for anybody who's wondering, this year was 2020. I'm sorry, what was this? This was 2018. 2018. I have one more movie from 2018, which I will get to much later in the podcast. But for me, watching this movie, it frustrated me. And it always pisses people off. When we talked about it on the other podcast, it pissed people off too. You know where I have Wakanda Forever in my MCU ranking?
It's actually pretty high, isn't it?
7.
Yeah, that's what I thought. You were pretty high on that movie.
I like Wakanda Forever. I gave Wakanda Forever a solid 3, and I was ready to push it up to 3.5. Like, I enjoyed Wakanda Forever a lot. But Black Panther, the first one, it does nothing for me. The last fight scene, to me, is one of the worst of any of the MCU fights. It's terrible. It's so bad. And this is really, to me, Black Panther was when we really started to see the CGI onslaught where it didn't actually look that good. Some of the visual effects in that movie are stunning, but then there's other moments such as those end fight scenes where it's like, we just got to get as much crap on the screen as we possibly can. Don't worry about just get it on there. It can look like crap. We don't care. Our audiences are going to see it anyway. It's a frustrating movie. I don't like it. I've always said if Barry Jenkins took the same story and if Wakanda was like a made up place where this kid living in an inner city life was living a terrible life, he needs to go take that storyline and make that movie with much better CGI and visual effects and everything. And that would be a great movie. Put it in the hands of a confident, and like, look, the crazy thing about this is too, I was almost going to say, put this in the hands of a confident director. I don't want to rip Ryan Coogler because Ryan Coogler is a solid director. Fruitvale Station's great. Creed is solid. And like I said, I like the second Black Panther, but this just made no sense to me. I don't feel like Ryan Coogler actually had his finger on the pulse of this movie at all. I don't feel like he had much to do with this. And it's one of those fake successes, just like another movie from that year, which is just absolutely atrocious. So that's what I have. Kevin Hernandez is nominating Black Panther for Best Picture, the equivalent of a 4th grader getting 2nd place in a 1st grade spelling bee.
Yikes. Oh, what an analogy that is. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little higher on this movie than you are. I give it 2.5 stars when we watched it again. But the third act ruins this movie. There's so much interesting things There's so many interesting things happening in the first half. The idea of like traditional versus technology, the integration of them. And of course, like the social commentary and everything beyond that. And even like the idea of like the sins of the father falling on the son and those type of things. There's so many good things that could have come out of this movie, and it just falls flat in that third act. Is kind of the way where I land on it. But you know, it's not on my list. Don't worry, it's not on my list. It's only on Phil's list.
The other thing that killed me with this is I had not seen a Marvel movie since the Avengers. And so then when I sit down and I watch this and it's like, no, this is like the best picture nominee. So I'm like, okay, maybe Marvel has gotten its shit together. And then I watched it. I was like, oh.
This is also a weird year at the Oscars, though.
Probably the most questionable year ever.
Yeah.
At Oscars. I mean, let me read off these nominees real quick. It's going to spoil what one of our movies is later. Green Book, Black Panther, Black Klansman, Bohemian Rhapsody, The Favorite, Roma, A Star is Born, and Vice. What a mess.
I will say this. There was another movie from this year that was very close to making my list.
Well, I'm assuming you didn't put Vice on, but you were close.
I did not, but it got very close to being on my list.
You see, I didn't mind Vice. I thought Vice was okay. I thought was like one of the funniest scenes and like from that year, like really just like struck me as so good was when he is riding on the horse and they do the fake titles. Oh, that part killed me. Where it's just like, and then he lived with his daughter and everything was great. And you're like, no, like that part killed me because just like that alternative reality of Dick Cheney's life. But it's just a mess of a year because it's like, why were those the movies, right? Like what were we thinking? What was going on? I don't know. It was a confusion.
All this Yorgos disrespect is just not acceptable.
I know. And that year, Olivia Colman was the only thing that won, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. All right, what's your number 9?
Number 9 is actually, I think this is the only one on my list that doesn't make me upset, and that's because it's way too boring. It is so boring. It is so insanely boring. Nothing goes on, and it's there's a mechanism in the movie, the titular mechanism in the movie, to allow you to do like these vignettes of the First World War, and it just doesn't equate to a cohesive film. It's Warhorse.
So, John, this is the one I took off my list.
Wow.
This is the one I took off my list. Yes. My favorite part about Warhorse was like, war is good. Like the end of the movie, like that seems to be like what the message is, right? When it's like, oh, well, like he found his horse, even though he's blind. It's like, but war is great. The scene in Warhorse where he breaks the stone with the plow will forever go down as like one of the most cringy. And this is when Spielberg, to me, really lost his mind a little bit. Spielberg lost his touch. I mean, West Side Story was very good. We talked about that. I actually enjoyed The Fabelmans. I know a lot of people didn't, but I thought The Fabelmans was a pleasant, nice movie. Warhorse, Lincoln, The Post. That was a rough stretch for Spielberg. And it's funny because during all of that, Bridge of Spies comes out. And like, that's the one that doesn't get the massive critical acclaim, but it's the best of those four, in my opinion. It's not even close. So anyway, Warhorse to me, it was close. I ultimately took it off. The problem with Warhorse, it's just so cheesy. Like Spielberg just went full cheese on this.
And that's really what it comes down to. Like, first off, it takes a long time for the First World War to start in this movie. It's like 50 minutes into this movie before we actually get to war. And the problem is it's really trying to focus on this horse as the main character. And because of that, it detracts from us learning anything about anyone else in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to get to
the sound that the horse makes. That's all the horse says. So you can't even learn about the horse's character.
I am going to get to another Spielberg, though, shortly. I do have another Spielberg on my list here. So,
yeah, but it's just, I don't know. It could have, I think there's an interesting conceit here, but the moment where the Germans and the British stopped shooting at each other because the horses in the battlefield, I was just like, I'm completely out of this movie. I can't take this seriously anymore.
Yeah, no, it's like, I don't know. I have the Oscar thing up here. And so Warhorse, just to put like, I like to put the years to it so people kind of know. This was 2011. It was The Artist, The Descendants, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, The Help, Hugo, Midnight in Paris, Moneyball, The Tree of Life, Warhorse. And that was also the year, though, where like if you're looking for like what else came out that year, you had Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which was a tough one for sure. I mean, there's no denying
I enjoyed that
one. Shame, no Oscar nomination for Shame. Steve McQueen got no love for that movie. Beginners, it got nothing. Bridesmaids, got nothing. Warrior got nothing. There were so many movies. A Separation, one of the best screenplays you'll ever see. Crazy. And Jordan Alford says it wasn't the worst nom that year. You are absolutely right, Jordan.
We'll get there.
You are absolutely right. In fact, I have 2 movies from this year. I have 2 movies from this year, and one of them is probably going to shock some people, but I don't care. So, John, what is your number 8?
You know what? Jordan Alford already said it was a mid movie, but it's less than mid. It is the first Avatar.
I ultimately kept it off. I gave it 2 stars, but honestly, this was one of the first 2-star movies I cut.
Yeah, this was one that I was like locking it in right away. I know it's going to be on my list because, and I double checked because I was like, did I give this 2 stars last time because we rewatched it? We rewatched it for
right before
Way of Water came out.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, what did I end up giving this on Letterboxd? Wait, what was my review? And I gave it 1.5 stars. And then I looked, and my review actually says 1 star. So I went lower on this. There was a lot of hubbubaloo about this movie, and we can talk about the lack of depth to the movie, how it's a just like blatant rip-up of this like typical story of, I mean, like, it's kind of a white savior movie, but like it's Pocahontas, it's Dances with Wolves, it's Fern Gully, like whatever you want to say, these environmentalist ideas. It's this massive tech demo that obviously James Cameron spent a long time trying to perfect. Doesn't even look good now. And granted, like again, we're 15 years removed from this movie now, so it's not gonna look well. But it just kind of, I think this is kind of like the epitome of showing a film that's like, this is why investing so hard in CGI was a bad idea.
I mean, Jurassic Park still looks pretty damn good. So do Lord of the Rings movies.
And that's what I'm saying is like going this heavy into CGI is just a mistake because everything looks fake. But ultimately, the thing that really has always gotten me about this movie is the clear point where there was a placeholder in the script and they didn't bother to change it. And that is unobtainium.
Yeah.
The fact that it is actually called unobtainium in this movie pisses me off so much because unobtainium is a concept. It is not an actual material. It is a concept of something that when we're talking about like international parlance and stuff, it is the idea of a mineral or something that a invading country would like to obtain, hence the name. It's not actually a thing, and they didn't even bother giving it a name. They just called it the thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, Avatar was funny because that came out when I was a senior in high school. Yeah, senior in high school. And I remember like it took me forever to go see that, and people were going to see it. They're like, "It's the best thing ever. You got to see it on the big screen." This was when there was the big 3D push, which I was so over 3D. I'm wearing glasses, wearing 3D on top of that sucks. So I was just like, I can't do this. This is like a disaster. And we went and saw it. I remember being like, that was fine. I rooted really hard against it to win Best Picture because at the end of the day, I thought The Hurt Locker was better. But I rooted really hard for it to lose Best Picture. But like, there were so much better movies that came out that year. Like Up or Up in the Air, I think are clearly better than this movie. I really like Up in the Air. I think Up in the Air has become a very underrated movie the further we've moved away. I thought Precious was good. Obviously, Inglourious Bastards. I mean, that's not even a question.
Probably should have won.
Yeah, that to me, that's the winner from that year. But then you had A Single Man, which wasn't even nominated that year. Like I keep saying that, but like that's so crazy to me. A Serious Man gets nominated. A Single Man did not. So yeah, like there's so much. And Jordan says Up in the Air should have won. Up in the Air was also very much of the time. That movie came out during the housing crisis and everything like that. And it's about somebody who's just laying people off. That's his job. He flies around the country and fires people because their bosses are too weak to do it. That's a great movie. That was when Jason Reitman was at his absolute best. And yeah, ultimately though, like I rewatched Avatar on like a normal TV. It just doesn't look that good.
It doesn't hold up at all.
Yeah. So Alan says, I understand some criticisms with the Avatar movies, but I grew up watching the movie as a kid in theaters with my dad, so I have a strong connection to it. I do like Way of Water a lot more. Well, I have bad news for you, Alan.
I have very bad news for you.
Yeah, I have bad news there because I have Avatar: The Way of Water on this list. So we will talk about that in a bit. All right. My number 8. This is the most random one I have on here, and
Okay.
this is like probably one of my favorites, and this is what I ultimately took Warhorse off because I was like, no, like I can't be me and not have this movie on this list. So if there's anything people know about me, it's that I love movies, right? Like I tell everybody I love movies. Like I love movies, right? That's shocking. I love movies. And not only do I love movies, like I love the history of film. I love like getting into the background. That's why I mean I study these best picture nominees. Like my big project in film school was about best pictures. That's why like I know these things inside and out. Granted, it was easier to do in 2013 when there was 12 years less of movies.
Yeah.
But like I go out of my way to see all these movies. I love the history of film. I think that it's something that's kind of getting lost, right? When you get like the streamers just throw stuff out so fast, you can't even keep up. If it doesn't get enough clicks, it's like disappears, whatever. So you would think that I'd like this movie. I also like the director quite a bit. I have 2 or 3 of his movies in my top 100. I also really like Chloe Grace Moretz. I thought she was a very talented actress. I really like Ben Kingsley. Like, I like all of these things. I hate Hugo with a burning passion. A burning passion. I hate this movie. And it's so crazy because when we came out of the movie, I'll never forget this. We saw this when we were in college. And we came out of the movie and like me and my friends were talking about it. And I was like, yeah, it was okay. Like, whatever. Like, you know, it's fine. Blah, blah, blah. And like the next day I woke up and I was like, that was one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I hate that movie. I hate that movie. I hated Hugo so much. And my one friend will always make fun of me for it. He's like, nobody's ever done a 180 on a movie more than you did on Hugo, where I was fine with it. And then what drove me nuts was just like, I felt like it was just one of the most convoluted, over the top, unnecessary plots. It looks good, but like, it just, Scorsese shouldn't have done it. Jordan Alford's over here in all caps. Absolutely not. Look, this movie, I knew that this would probably be my most, what's the word? Why can I think?
Controversial?
Controversial. Why was I wanting to say confrontation?
I don't know.
Controversial. I knew it would be my most controversial, but at the end of the day, like Hugo does not do it for me. I have never rewatched it. And honestly, when I saw it nominated in 2011 was a pretty bad year for at least the nominations.
Yeah.
I just don't like Hugo. I probably should have put The Help on this list over Hugo, but I just don't like Hugo. I don't like it. So I got Hugo, number 8. Yeah. I'm saying Hugo is a worse movie than Coda, which is just mind blowing to me.
So
let's just keep this up while you talk about it.
So anyone who's listening to this podcast at this point should know I'm not the biggest Scorsese guy. Mm-hmm. I think his movies are pretty overrated all the way around. And when I was doing research for this, I was like, Hugo, I remember there being like quite a few people who didn't like this movie when it was nominated. Why is this? I'd never seen it. I watched it this week. It's number 13 on my list.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it just about got there. But I think when it does do the film stuff, really cool. Really appreciate the film stuff. Everything else about this movie is just like, I do not care about this whatsoever.
I mean, to me, it's like, just go watch the Tonight music video. If you want to Malaise honor Malaise without watching A Trip to the Moon, go watch that. Yeah. I love film history, and this
like 15 minutes long.
and what's crazy too is like this was a movie that I saw when I was in college in film school. So this is like the height of my film love. Mm-hmm. Not like this movie. I didn't.
The problem is it deals with this like child character, and the actor playing Hugo is not that great.
Yeah, Asia Butterfield didn't really do much beyond this.
No, he didn't do much afterwards either, did he?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like beyond this was really it.
And Chloe Grace Moretz isn't even at her best in this movie by any means. It's probably one of her weaker performances.
I mean, Let Me In is the best she ever did.
Well,
I say it all the time,
but it just, it's not great. And Ben Kingsley kind of just comes off as grumpy curmudgeon for a lot of the film. And it just doesn't deal into these ideas that it proposes a lot of good ideas and then never delves into them really. Like we get to this idea where Hugo and his dad, played by Jude Law, is there, and it's like kind of building on that, and it shows us the importance of the what is that thing called? The robot-y thing. Animatron? Nope.
I haven't seen it in so long.
I cannot remember the words that they use in it. There are so many different words, but point being is they do like they show that part, and it's like it never really reflects on the fact that Hugo's kind of traumatized by the fact that his dad died brutally in a fire.
Yeah,
it's so surface level, and it has these cool aspects to it. Again, like the everything with Millier is really cool when it starts delving into the film history of it, but it's just like the vehicle around it doesn't quite get there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, and this Kevin Hernandez, there's so many better movies where directors show off how much they love cinema. That's how I feel. Like Cinema Paradiso. Yeah, exactly. This wanted to be Cinema Paradiso.
Yeah.
My number 7, probably going to make Jordan mad too. Jordan, hopefully we keep you around, Hopefully you just keep liking the videos and stuff. I have The Post. So this is my Spielberg movie after all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So really funny story. When The Post came out, my boss at the time loved The Post. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. Was like, you need to see The Post. This movie's a masterpiece. Like, she loved it. And I watched The Post and I was like, man, what do I think of my boss now? Huh, interesting. I just found this movie to be so corny. Everything about this movie is so corny. I can't stand Tom Hanks in this movie. I can't stand Meryl Streep in this movie. The way they tell the story, this wanted to be Spotlight so bad. And it's crazy when I compliment Spotlight, right? I'm complimenting Spotlight. Jordan Alford said, I actually thought you'd put Lincoln. At the end of the day, if they don't recite the Gettysburg Address at the beginning of the movie to Lincoln, I probably would have been fine with that movie. The thing, Lincoln to me is just I shoulder shrug at Lincoln, really, at the end of the day. I don't think Lincoln's that good. I don't think Lincoln's that bad. Lincoln's like a 2.5-star movie, in my opinion. But The Post, if I watch Tom Hanks roll his sleeves up one more time, I was going to throw my phone at the movie theater screen and hope I broke the screen. I'll pay AMC to fix their screen so I don't have to watch Tom Hanks roll his damn sleeves up one more time. It's just too cheesy. It's just way too cheesy. It's one of those movies that, like, I'm not surprised my boss at the time liked it because it is like one of those, like, it's a very left-wing story.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is why some people pretended to like it more than they did. And that's just my opinion. I think that there's some people who are like, especially out in Hollywood, it was like, this is a better movie because whatever. I didn't think the story was good. I didn't think the acting was good. Spielberg's direction took a dive off a cliff for some reason. It's just bad. It's just corny. And I will never watch this movie again for as long as I live.
I've never seen this movie. It was one that was on my radar for research, but there were more pressing matters to address when it came to this list. And The Post just didn't end up being one of them.
What's really funny to me, John, though, with you is that we had, like, you do so much research for all of these other podcasts where there isn't a finite number. Finally, I give you a topic that there's a finite number that you can do. And you're like, I didn't get to that one.
Yeah, a finite number is what? We are 25 years. We're talking about 26 years of movies with a minimum of 5 each. Phil, that's over 125 movies.
Should have seen them earlier, John.
I should have. And that's just what it comes down to. But I've also just avoided bad movies as much as possible.
Yeah, so this came out 2017. And this was Shape of Water, Call Me By Your Name, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Get Out, Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, The Post, 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri.
This is also my Bella Coola time when I was living in the middle of nowhere and had to drive 5 hours to go to a movie theater. So makes sense how I missed this one.
Yeah. Just didn't do it for me. So that's what I have at number 7. John, what do you have at 7?
Something you're going to have much higher up on your list.
You think so?
I know so.
Oh.
Because you haven't said it yet.
Okay.
It's Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, I have it much higher.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is you have much
so
higher.
This is Queen.
So this is a very terrible music biopic. And it's very interesting, like in a year where we have another music biopic up for Best Picture, like we do every couple of years, to kind of look at how A Complete Unknown and Bohemian Rhapsody are such different spectrums of what a music biopic should be. Because my God, this movie is horrendous. And like, that's the point where we're at, right? Like I already said it. The first Avatar, 1-star film. The rest of these movies are 1-star films for me. This movie just does not do anything right. It doesn't present any character. It doesn't present any reason for the inclusion of the music that it's doing. And one of the things that I kind of commended A Complete Unknown for doing was using the Bob Dylan songs in their entirety, because it was so important to who Bob Dylan was as a person. We get so many just like different snippets of Queen songs in this movie. It doesn't make any sense.
It's a music video. This movie is a music video posing as a biopic for one of the most interesting lives of a rock star we're ever going to see. And they don't get into any depth of Freddie Mercury at all. And what's really funny about this movie is when I saw this movie in a good mood. Which I just have to preface with. I saw this movie in a good mood. And so the first time I saw it, I was like, yeah, it was fine, whatever. Walked out of the theater. No big deal. I was in grad school post my Warner Brothers job, and I was like, whatever, like I'm in a good mood. Nobody's gonna rain on my parade. And I remember like people in school like liked it all the time, blah, blah, blah. And I was watching it, and then like it was on TV a little bit later. Like, you know, you're just flicking through whatever. And I was like, oh my God, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. And then like I started like me and my friends started talking about it, and we would send clips back and forth. And we were like, oh my God. And this wasn't that much later, right? Like this was like before the Oscars even came out. And we we're like, this movie's terrible. Like the whole scene with Aidan Gillen where he sits down and is like, this is Queen. Like it is so bad. And then as Jordan says, that editing win is the worst Oscar win of all time. All time. Look, when I say I came out of this movie and I was like, it was fine, I mean like 2 stars. This is a 1-star movie, and we'll get to it when I get to it. What a bad movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's your number 6? Also, the worst Best Actor winner. What do I have that ranked? See, I have all these things ranked, and I haven't watched all the Best Actor winners. I've seen, how many of the Best Actor winners have I seen? I've seen 68 of the Best Actor winners, and I have this ranked 67, only ahead of In Old Arizona, which is a literal brown face role. So that'll tell you.
This is literally like, hey, you're wearing veneers, and all of a sudden you're a Best Actor winner.
And what's
Rami Malek's performance in this is atrocious. It's so bad.
What really hurts is that year you had Bradley Cooper for A Star Is Born. You had Willem Dafoe for At Eternity's Gate. You had, honestly, John David Washington wasn't even nominated for Black Klansman. Yep. Like all of those, and it's not close. And like honestly, Christian Bale
in Vice is pretty good. Yeah,
he's pretty good. You had Ethan Hawke for a movie I'm not even that fond of, but First Reformed.
Yeah,
this was so bad. This is so bad. Anyway, okay, I'll get to it more. I'll get to it more in the future. Is it my turn or yours?
It's mine. I'm pretty sure, right? My number 6.
Yeah, what's your 6?
My number 6. Again, this is the one that I think is going to make people the most upset. We're covering it on the Patreon next week. So if you want to hear me get more into depth about why I hate this movie so much, it's American Hustle.
This is another one for me that I'm just like, yeah, I don't like the first half. I enjoyed the second half. My family likes it way too much. I roll my eyes every time they praise it. It's whatever movie to me. This
is a movie that I avoided watching this movie for a long time. I remember when it came out in 2013, everyone loved this movie. Like there was so much hype around this movie and how good it was. I finally sat down to watch it. It's just so uninspired. There is nothing to this movie. The plot is super thin. I don't even think the performances are all that good. The cinematography is pretty derivative. It feels like a sad replication of every other movie of the genre that came before it.
David O. Russell was all the rage for 3 years. He went 3 years in a row where he went The Fighter. It wasn't 3 years in a row, but he went The Fighter, Silver Linings Playbook, and then this. So it was 3 out of 4 years. He was all the rage. People were seeing his movies. People liked his movies, whatever. American Hustle, like I'm just indifferent towards. I don't like the first half, and then they sing the Tom Jones song, and I think the second half is way better. for me, the first half is whatever. Him sitting in the chair doing like the weird like arm movement, like with his gut hanging out. I'm like, the story doesn't pick up until the second half. And I thought it was a little bit of a mess. I'll take Silver Linings Playbook and The Fighter over this movie 1,000 times out of 1,000. But this wasn't really even close to coming into my bottom 10. Not even close.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how you feel about it when you rewatch it for the Patreon.
I like it. No, I'm going to be indifferent because that's just how I feel. I'll probably start texting halfway through. All right, let me get to my number 6. It's going to take me a while to type this. Oh, God, it's so long. It's so long, John.
Oh, I mean, I think I must know what this is then.
Extremely loud and incredibly close. And most people are probably going to look at this and say, Phil, how do you have this only here? Like, you should have.
I'm actually shocked right now.
You thought I was going to have it higher on my list?
Well, you wait till you see how high I have it on my list.
Well, that's how I felt with you with Bohemian Rhapsody there, sir.
That's true. That's true.
You know what the thing is with Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close? I don't like this movie. I never thought it was good. But the expectations upon watching this movie, the one and only time I'll ever watch this movie, were so low because it had like a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's so low.
Like there's a section in the Wikipedia for Academy Award for Best Picture dedicated to Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. Yeah. That's how much of a controversy it was when this got nominated for Best Picture. Stephen Daldry. No, this isn't. Who directed this? I want to make sure I get the name right here. Scott Rudin produced it. So this came out in 2011. This was the same year as War Horse. This was the same year as Hugo. So, you know, bad year. No, it was Stephen Daldry.
It was Stephen Daldry, yeah.
So Stephen Daldry is so hit or miss, right? Like Stephen Daldry does, he does The Hours, he does Billy Elliot, but then he does this and he does The Reader. And it's like, I don't get why they love Stephen Daldry so much in the Academy. This movie's so bad. And Billy Zane says, isn't this the movie 9/11 movie with Tom Hanks? You would think Billy Zane would know this. It is the 9/11 movie with Tom Hanks. It's like they just decide to like take 9/11 and use it as the backdrop for this kid's like autism. And it's just cringeworthy the entire time. This will forever go down as the biggest question mark of why. But again, because this movie, when I saw it, I already went into it being like, this is going to be terrible. The 5 movies I have above this are movies that I feel like some people genuinely like. And my expectations, therefore, were higher for all of them. But this is, I mean, Max von Sydow, good for you getting an Oscar nomination, I guess. This movie's so bad.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about this a lot later. But keep in mind, it's very rare that a Best Picture nominee only gets one other nomination.
Yeah. What was the other nomination? Oh, just Max von Sydow.
Just Max von Sydow. Yeah. Just Max von Sydow.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll get into my number 5 here then. So you can talk about that one later. My number 5. I have a little movie known as Don't Look Up. Remember that one, John?
I will remember it further down my list.
Okay. What's funny about Don't Look Up is we had to cover this.
We did.
We had to. Jordan Alford said there's United 93 and then there's this movie. Jesus. But anyway, when you look at Don't Look Up, this movie came out when we first started doing the Best Picture stuff over on the podcast. So this was 2021. It comes out the same year as Coda. And like, this was the only movie I didn't want to beat Coda. That's how bad this movie was.
Yeah.
Like, Coda made my list, and I have Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up is not funny. It was just, let's cram in as many famous people as we possibly can and tell the most paper-thin, lame story we possibly can. It's so boring. It's not funny. It's not clever. I got to find what my actual review was because I remember just being like, this movie stinks. But it's just, Adam McKay got really hot because of what he did with The Big Short. And I thought Vice was okay, but that was a pretty polarizing movie. And then he did this and it was like, why are we nominating this guy? Like, what are we doing? I'm looking at the people I follow on Letterboxd. Every one of the reviews is 2.5 stars or lower for the people I follow.
Yeah. What's the average rating for this movie on Letterboxd though?
3.0.
It's wild.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can tell you what my review for this movie says because I remember it. quite well. And it's that satire isn't satire if it's just imitating real life. And Don't Look Up doesn't know what satire is because it's just real life.
Yeah, here's my review. I said everything about this movie feels half finished and half assed, boring, awkward, and not in a good way, and incredibly uneven. Don't think I laughed once, not even sure I smiled.
It's a heinous film. It is so, and don't forget, this movie is also ridiculously long.
Yeah, okay. Now that I'm looking at that, that is, yeah, what, a runtime of 138 minutes? Why?
Yeah, it was so heinously long. It's this idea of satire about people not taking
A
it's
comet, seriously. Yeah,
it's a global warming analogy and things like that, or like a climate change analogy, but it just doesn't land. And everyone feels like they are giving the worst performance of their career because they don't even care about the paycheck they're getting on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And so what else was this nominated for? It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards.
Oh my God.
It's crazy. Yeah, I don't like this movie at all. And I'm glad to see, though, like a 3.0. I'm so happy to see that.
That is actually, because I did do a bit of research and I was looking through, that is about the lowest you get for any of the Academy Award nominees.
Yeah, I think the only one that's lower is Crash, and that's just because people hate review Crash. Most people they can do what they want. I love Crash, don't care.
And even then, Crash is still like a 2.8 or something like that.
Yeah, Crash should be like a 4 point something. Anyway, John, what is your number 5?
Oh, we already talked about the first one, so it's time we got to talk about the second one. It's Avatar: The Way of Water.
And we're going to talk about that more later. I haven't gotten to mine yet.
There you go. Ultimately, what this comes down to, Avatar's already on my list. They did it again.
They did it worse.
They did it worse. And it's longer. And it's just, there was a point where I got up during this movie. I came back from the washroom, didn't miss a single thing. I'm pretty sure it was the same scene. Let me tell you, wasn't the shortest bathroom trip.
I always, when I get into a movie, I sit down, I watch the movie, I don't get up. Like, I will hold my pee until I'm about to pee my pants. Like, and I will be like, I can suffer through. I can make it for the art of this man or woman. I can do it. Avatar: The Way of Water. I got about an hour in. I said, oh my God, this movie's exactly what I thought it was going to be. I got to go get something to eat. And I literally got up. I think I got peanut M&Ms and popcorn and then walked back.
It's like the whale scene, right? It's when the whales are first introduced. Because I'm pretty sure that's the exact same point where I decided to get it.
Oh, I don't remember. I just know the story is paper thin. It again, sure, it looks fine. Whatever. I've already seen it. Like, I don't care. We'll get to it in a little bit. This and Bohemian Rhapsody, 2 movies you've already mentioned. I haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah.
I'm getting them.
There you go. Yeah, it's just, again, it doesn't do anything to really escalate the world or anything like that. Like, yes, it's introducing these newer concepts, but they don't add anything to what Avatar was already doing. We still have the same conflict. So much so that they bring back the same villain.
Same villain, man.
Like, it's literally the same movie.
I know.
And somehow it gets another Oscar nominee. This is the reason why this is so much higher up my list than Avatar. It's unacceptable that this was able to get anywhere near an Oscar nomination.
Yeah, I gave this 1 star. We haven't gotten there yet, but my review was this movie was 192 minutes too long. I literally, there's no redeeming qualities for me about this movie. I don't care.
Yeah,
it's I don't
a
care.
long one, and we're probably going to have to do it again when the third one gets nominated for Best Picture.
I don't know, man. They might stop. Honestly, they
maybe
might stop. What are we up to? 4? You on 4?
You're on 5.
I did 5, didn't I?
Wait, am I on 4 then?
I did 5. I did Don't Look Up. Yeah, you're on 4.
Right. I'm on 4. Number 4 is my most recent one on this list. It's Emilia Perez.
Okay, well, that's my number 4.
Oh, perfect.
So there you go.
Jordan Alford has corrected me. Emilia Perez is currently sitting at a 2.3 on Letterboxd, so that is the lowest rated. We both have it at number 4. That tells you a lot about the other movies we're going to talk about here. But this movie, I don't even know where to begin with this movie. We have an entire Patreon podcast where we talk about this movie. I don't understand how anyone could ever watch this movie and enjoy it.
I just for me, this is what's driving me the most crazy about Emilia Perez. I sit down and I watch I'm Still Here. That is a beautifully made, epic, technical, whatever film. and it's not supposed to win international film over Amelia Perez. I watch Wicked, and Ariana Grande gives a solid musical performance, and she's not supposed to beat Zoe Saldana. The songs aren't good. The movie's not good. And I remember, so this is the funny thing, right? Like you go on social media and this movie gets nominated for whatever, and you see like one of the scenes from it. It's the whole like, the Asian doctor singing, right? And I was like, okay, they're probably taking that out of context. They've taken the Enora ending out of context, and people are trying to crap on that with the whole, here's your trigger warning, I guess, but with the whole, why wouldn't you rate me conversation. And when you take that out of context, if you take the 130th page of a 140-page script out of context, it might seem weird, but that's a callback to something earlier in the movie, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, maybe this is just out of context. And then I watched that scene and I was like, oh my God, what the hell just happened? Because I was actually fine with the movie up to that point. And then that happened. And then from that moment on, I was just like, yo, this movie needs to end. I cannot stand this at all.
Yeah. And it's so, I don't even know. Like, you show that clip. I showed it to a couple of friends afterwards who hadn't seen it. And they're like, what is the context of this? I'm like, no, it's exactly what you think it is.
That's the context.
That's the context. It's just so surface level. It doesn't investigate anything. It's quite offensive, in all honesty. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that this character of Amelia Perez makes no sense.
Well, if you're a woman, you're caring and loving, and if you're a man, you're a hardened criminal who wants to kill. That's
literally what this movie is saying.
Yeah,
it makes no sense. One of the big things for me going through it when watching it was, okay, which of these two songs are the ones nominated for Best Original Song? And then you get to El Mal, and I'm like, wow, this is a terrible scene. Like, it is awful. The song is so bad. The choreography and like Zoe Saldana's dancing, atrocious. And I'm like, okay, well, what's this other one? And then Mi Camino is the most nothing song in the entire movie.
I'll take El Mal over Mi Camino at this point.
Yeah, I will too. But Mi Camino is just like, it's so pointless. It's literally a karaoke song that's being sung in the movie. They didn't even bother like making it fit into the context of the film.
Here's the problem, right, with the Oscars and everything, and this is so known, but it's just like, you reiterate it when you do a podcast like this. Like, because it became a popularity contest, the fact that Selena Gomez was trending for a while as a potential for Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah.
Like, what are we talking about? What are we doing? Like, it makes she doesn't do anything in the movie. She's not all that good. Like, she doesn't do anything. And it's, we got to nominate Selena Gomez. And if enough people tweet that, because social media is becoming like the preferred way of ingesting media as opposed to actual, like other, I'm not calling it actual, but other media sources, all of a sudden people who are voting for this are looking and like, well, people really like Selena Gomez. I'll vote for her, whatever. It's like, what are we doing? What are we doing with the popularity contest? We don't need Selena Gomez versus Ariana Grande for the memes.
No.
Like, we don't need it. This movie's so bad. And I'm so happy. Like, look, Crash is getting review bombed. Right? A lot of movies are getting review bombed. It happens all the time. Like, movies will get review bombed. I've never been happier to see a movie get review bombed than Amelia Perez. And I watched it and I gave it 1.5 stars. And honestly, the first 15 minutes I was okay with. Everything after that, done.
Every person who I have talked to about this movie in real life, like, I mean, there are a couple people online who
I think Jordan liked it.
Jordan Alford did say he liked it. On the first watch. He watched it before everyone like got onto the movie and everything. Everyone else who I have spoken to about this movie has been like, hey, John, have you seen this movie? Like, what was that? It was so bad.
Yeah. I honestly, like, I'd be curious why the people who do like it. But for me, it was just like, I don't get it. I didn't get it. Number 3, I know we have the same one for this too.
Do we?
The Blind Side, right?
We do. Yes,
yeah.
we do. Oh, yes.
You mentioned that when we were doing the podcast for Patreon. What a rough movie. We dive into this one on the Patreon, and it's funny because we both don't like this. Like with American Hustle, we're not going to dive in as hard, but we dive into this one on the Patreon. It releases tomorrow. The first scene, I talked about this so depth, but the first football game scene in this movie is one of the all-time worst things ever put on film, hands down, no questions asked. The caricatures, the cartooniness, the absolute ridiculousness of this offensive lineman doesn't know how to make contact with the guy who is smaller than him just because he hasn't had to be protective yet. This movie and story is absolute garbage. It's always been absolute garbage. Michael Orr has come out and said that the conservatorship that was over him has made it so that this story has been skewed to the point where he's made to look stupid and like he doesn't know how to play football. You don't become an All-American because a kid with funny teeth teaches you how to play football. That's not what happens. This movie is so bad. And Sandra Bullock's Oscar win is one of the all-time worst. It's so pathetic. I hate it so much. The Blind Side, my number 3. Your number 3 as well. But
my number 3 as well. It's just, I said it on the Patreon podcast. My roommate literally yelled at the TV for 2 hours as we watched this movie. It's so frustrating. It's just, you're so frustrated watching it because none of it makes sense. Nothing makes sense. There's so many different aspects of it to be frustrated with. And, rightfully so. There are these aspects of, the education system not appropriately accommodating a student who clearly needs accommodations. But again, 20 years ago, we weren't approaching accommodations in schools as well as we do now. And even now, we don't approach accommodations all that well in schools. Mm-hmm. There was a point where my roommate's just like, why are all the adults calling him Big Mike?
Yeah.
Because it makes no sense. Makes no sense whatsoever.
The best is when the kid walks in and says, "You're Big Mike, aren't you?" Who told this 7-year-old kid or 8-year-old kid or whatever this kid's supposed to be that kid's name was Big Mike? Who is like? You can't tell me that all the kids are talking about. Also, like, what school is this that like second graders are going to school with high schoolers?
It's a private Christian school.
Still move them around. I don't know. This movie stinks.
It's just so bad. And there was something that I did not mention on the Patreon podcast. I'm going to mention it here. The exclusive that you can only get on the actual live podcast. The NCAA conversation, where the NCAA is investigating as to whether or not the Toolies have tampered to make it so that this guy goes to their alma mater. And that's the investigation. And we get back to the second NCAA scene that really bugs me. We get back there, and Big Mike's like, hey, so no one's ever asked me why I want to go to Ole Miss. And the investigator asks, and he says, that's where my family goes. I'm like, that is literally what the NCAA was trying to prevent. Literally that. That was literally what they had an issue with.
What is so... Okay, so like I've worked at university. Like I still do work at universities, right? Like I talk about, like I was a sports information director at a university down here in Florida. You get an NCAA investigation, you know how it's not going to go? The way any of that went. Like, and that was the thing that drove me the most nuts with this movie is it didn't know whether it wanted to be a hokey family movie or it wanted to take itself seriously. So it falls into this weird zone of like taking itself seriously sometimes and then being a hokey family movie at other times. It's horrible. It's just a horrible depiction of everything, of football, of this guy, Michael Orr, who does have a great story, of race relations, of the NCAA, of coaches. Mm-hmm. Like that coach, I didn't realize like that coach doesn't know how to do football. He needs Sandra Bullock to come over and be like, Mike, Big Mike, big, blah, 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 blah. It's like, cool, you wore a wig with annoying bangs. I hate you in this movie. And it's crazy because then she comes out in Gravity 4 years later and gives an absolutely incredible performance. Carries a movie about falling back to earth. Blue Jasmine, ultimately, that was earned by Cate Blanchett. There's no doubt about it. But it's just funny that this is the movie Sandra Bullock won her Oscar for, and it's just a disaster, just a joke.
And it goes back to what I was saying with Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close earlier. This is another movie where Best Picture and Best Actress, only nominations that Blindside got.
Yeah.
The Academy knew this was a bad movie.
Oh, yeah. No, it makes no sense.
They still nominated it for Best Picture. And again, this is 2009. It's when we're really trying to figure out with a new expanded category and everything what to do. But it's so bad. And it's so... I don't understand how Mike, like, he should have been the main character. The entire focus should have been on Michael Orr, but it is not.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating because of it.
He just doesn't talk, but he eats at the table.
Yeah.
Brutal. All right, I'm gonna do my number 2 because we already covered Avatar: The
Oh,
Way
I
of
mean, we've
Water.
covered both of our number ones and number
Okay.
twos because we both have them lower on each other's lists.
Okay, well, I have Avatar: The Way of Water as my number 2. I hated this movie. I wasn't a fan of the first Avatar, as I've talked about. Ultimately, I kept that off my list here. But I wasn't a fan of the first Avatar. I wasn't pumped they were making a second. I was hoping it wouldn't be nominated. It's over 3 hours long. There's no reason for it to be over 3 hours long. The action sequences aren't all that interesting. The story is terrible. The CGI doesn't look as good. Like, it's not groundbreaking at that point, like it was with the first one. I hate that James Cameron's whole thing was we had to wait this long because we needed the technology to catch up. And that's the best you could do. You couldn't get a different script writer and just throw your name on it. Couldn't stand it. Can't stand Avatar: The Way of Water. Don't like it. Never will. Not if I will do everything in my power to not see the remaining Avatar movies, but that's all going to come down to whether or not they get nominated for Best Picture. I don't get it. Avatar: The Way of Water is so bad. So that's my number 2.
Yeah, my number 2 is Don't Look Up.
Okay.
It's I already went extensively into that. Like it's just a movie that doesn't understand what satire is. Adam McKay has no idea what he's doing in this film. You have literally this massive list of who's who in Hollywood in this movie. Not a single one of them decides to give an actual performance in this movie. Maybe Timothée Chalamet. Maybe. Yeah, and he's the biggest joke of a character in this movie.
Yeah. And then that means your number 1 is Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, correct?
It sure is. And let me tell you, this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, this is one that nobody would have watched had it not been nominated for Best
Picture. I am so mad I had to watch this movie because it is absolutely heinous. This is one of, like, I think 6 movies I have given a half-star review to.
I mean, it's just funny because, like, with this movie, I love Stephen Daldry. And Stephen Daldry has always been somebody who's more of a he's like a critic darling, but not necessarily a
general
audience darling, whatever. I've always defended him. I have The Hours in my top 100. I when we talked about the biggest inspirational movies, I have Billy Elliot on that list. I think that those movies are great. I don't know what happened with the production of this movie. I don't understand what took place that made it so bad. And that's the problem. Like, I just don't get it. And it didn't know what it wanted to be. And, like, man, it's like the performance from the kid just isn't good. I don't know.
We mention it a lot. Like, the performance of child actors can make or break a film. Mm-hmm. This film is so bad, it doesn't matter how bad this kid is acting.
Yeah.
Like, that's the most egregious thing, because he is one of the worst performances in a film I have ever seen. And again, he's a kid. He's a kid. Yeah. I get it. But
John's over here angry.
I'm really mad. This movie made me so upset because ultimately, what it comes down to, this movie exploits the tragedy of 9/11.
That's what I was going to say.
Because this entire movie is just this idea that like 9/11 plays nothing into this movie whatsoever. It is literally there just to make the audience maybe cry because they're thinking about a tragedy instead of this kid losing his father. There could have been, you could take this movie and actually investigate like the trauma of loss that a child is going through, and the fact that he's going on this scavenger hunt for like the lock to this key that he finds because he thinks his dad's left him this scavenger hunt because they did scavenger hunts together. And it's his escapism and trying to just kind of keep his dad alive. And like, it says that. It doesn't touch on it at all. It doesn't build into it. You could even make it this very interesting story about the lives of all these different people in New York as they're impacted by 9/11. And the fact that like we're focusing on the people. It doesn't do that either. This movie does nothing well. And it has Tom Hanks in it. It has Sandra Bullock in it, has Max von Sydow in it, and it is just all so. This is the point where we don't like using the term Oscar bait. This is such an Oscar bait movie. Yeah. It's not even funny.
And that was what Daldry always kind of got accused of, was making Oscar bait movies. Like his repertoire they were always Oscar movies. And like, honestly, I think there's some art to some of his movies, but yeah, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close is bad. Bohemian Rhapsody is my number 1. This movie is so bad. I don't care. And what really confused me about the Bohemian Rhapsody love at the time, this was during the Bryan Singer scandal. And Bryan Singer was the original director of this movie. And they pulled him off like halfway through and they threw together whatever. And for some reason, because it was the Bryan Singer scandal, Hollywood like attached to this movie even more. They promoted, everybody was so excited about this. And like, I understand liking Queen, right? Freddie Mercury, like I said, very interesting story there. but this was the best you could do. And it's literally a 2-hour music video. They pretend that they were getting no calls at Live Aid until Queen goes out and plays, which just like is straight up not true. Like, was the Queen performance iconic? Yes, that's it though. And so for me, I can't stand this movie. Rami Malek's performance is not good. Like, and Rami Malek has been good in other stuff. Like, we talk about The Little Things. Like that's a movie that a lot of people forget about. He's good in The Little Things. Like, Rami Malek can be solid. I think he was a solid Bond villain. Like, he can be good in movies. He has that moment in Oppenheimer. Like, he's solid in that. I don't get why people latched onto this. There's no story. There's no plot. It doesn't actually dive into how Freddie Mercury's life was. It just glosses over everything. And I get so tired of watching. You wrote that just now? Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. It's like, stop. Like, stop doing that. That's not how this all took place. Like, stop pretending that that's how it is. And again, that's where like I came into a Complete Unknown being like, I'm going to hate this movie. I actually really ended up enjoying Complete Unknown because it did everything that Bohemian Rhapsody didn't do. It made me more confident. The sun's going down. I'm about to be in pitch blackness here, John. So yeah, that's how I feel. Bohemian Rhapsody is my worst.
Yeah, I totally get it. This movie's so bad. After I watched it, I just didn't want to listen to Queen music anymore. Like, I think I had a Queen song come up on like random shuffle when I was listening to music, and I was like, no, I can't listen to Queen right now.
This movie
reminds me of how bad this movie is.
This movie did ruin Queen a little bit for me too. Like, I used to be a big fan of Don't Stop Me Now and Bohemian Rhapsody and all that, and it really did, because then like, when you think about Queen, everybody's like, well, he's one of the greatest lyricists ever, blah blah blah, and it's like, yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody's great, but like, he also has the bicycle race song. Like, not everything that Freddie Mercury wrote was absolute brilliance. And for some reason, this movie made $910 million. Fender, the infamous studio scene where there's 20 cuts in 12 seconds, wins best editing.
Yeah.
And Black Panther that was one of the worst Oscars I ever watched, because Black Panther won everything the favorite should have won. And then Bohemian Rhapsody won stuff, and watching all of the, watching the celebrities in their really nice attire dance to Queen at the beginning of that Oscars was one of the weirdest things ever. And it's like, I'm not saying that like the celebrities can't go out and have a good time, but they all looked as uncomfortable as I felt watching it.
Yeah.
That was the problem for me.
I don't know. It's just, it's not good. And this is the reason why music biopics, I think, have such a bad rep.
Yeah.
It's because of movies like Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh yeah. Bohemian Rhapsody was the one that really put it on the map, because it's like, and then all of a sudden it was like, let's just make a bunch of music biopics and it'll get Oscar clout. And it's like everything but Rocket Man did. And Rocket Man's probably the best one. Just a couple comments over here. Billy Zane, Rudy is still the best football movie. Jordan Alford says, remember the Titans is. Fender says, here for the Don't Look Up hate. A very nice guy says, James Cameron sucks. And then real Nicolas Cage jumped in importantly and said, Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance got robbed in 2011.
Might be the best comment of the day. Thank you.
And then Billy Zane points out John has 2 Sandra Bullock movies in his top 3.
Listen. This is not me flaming on Sandra Bullock. However, she's also in really bad movies.
Yeah, there was a stretch there for some reason. That's our list. Thank you all so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, taking a trip down a lane that we don't normally go, because normally we talk about positive things, and here we are talking about the worst Best Picture nominees. But let us know your list. Let us know what your movies are, what you would have put in here. If you put Crash, please comment somebody else's, or like put a parentheses for a different movie so I can pretend you didn't put Crash. But yeah, I'm curious what other people think. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in hearing us talk about the Best Picture nominees for this year, go become a patron. We're putting out the last one on the 28th. We'll be talking about Wicked. We've already recorded the other 8. And I'm Still Here is going out on Thursday, the 20th. So if you want to become, it's our mid-tier patronage. If you become that, you get access to that. And you can hear us talk about The Blind Side and American Hustle more in depth. And if you come in at that level, you pretty much get access to everything that we've put out before. You just get access to it now. That would also put you at the Australian Survivor level. So if you're interested in Australian Survivor, McKenna and I are starting Australian Survivor coverage this Friday for Brains vs. Brawn 1. And tonight, 2 hours from now, McKenna and I will be podcasting about the premiere episode of Australian Survivor Brains vs. Brawn 2. But yeah, if you're into the movie stuff, next Monday, John and I will be doing our Oscar predictions. We always do that before the Oscars come out. So we'll be doing our Oscar predictions next Monday. And That's it. I'll be in LA for the Oscars this year at the same time. I'll be there on that date. So that'll be the first time I'm in LA for the Oscars since I guess 2020, when nobody was really in LA for the Oscars. No, that was when Parasite won it. That was the last time I was there because Bong Joon thankfully got out there. I always say his name. What is it? Bong Joon-ho. Thank you. I don't know why, for some reason I always want to say Bong Joon-ho, but it's Bong Joon-ho. When he won the Oscar, everybody was like joking, like, thank God he won it before the COVID shutdown, because that man just went out and partied that night. He was so happy winning all of his Oscars. He's on the time of his life in LA that night. So yeah, there you go. Good stuff. Oscar predictions next week. We'll get into probably one of the most competitive Oscar races we have seen in recent memory. Very competitive, 100%. Very interesting to see how Anora has started to pull away, but I think there's still movies with a shot. So we'll talk about that. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.